Welcome to No Clip, the podcast that's like a book club for people who don't think that books reward them enough for being good at them. I'm Chad Rutherford.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And today, we're going to be talking about Castlevania 64, which was developed by Konami Computer Entertainment Kobe, and was published by Konami and released in 1999 on the Nintendo 64.
But first, if you can give us a like or a rating, it would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing to mention is that we are calling this episode Castlevania 64. Whenever we refer to the game, it will be called Castlevania 64. Everyone in their right mind refers to this game as Castlevania 64, but technically speaking, the name of the game is just Castlevania.
Yeah, I think they kind of, while they were developing it, were thinking of it as like a reboot for the series, I guess. Mm-hmm. The transition to 3D. And yeah, I guess maybe the name would have stuck better if the game had been received well.
That is the fickle trends of the common people, you know? But yeah, I don't know. I mean, we still call like Doom 2016, Doom 2016.
That's true.
So,
that's true. Just, yeah, for clarity.
But yeah. But for even more clarity about why we're doing this episode, it's Fanbruary. This is the second episode that we're doing this year, focusing on games that were suggested to us by members of our community. So thank you once again to everybody who submitted a game. So I would say, and you can disagree with me, because I don't think that it was this was not like a unanimous thing, or the opposite of that. It wasn't contentious, but I kind of pushed for Castlevania 64 on the list this year, because I'm just really, it's a game that I didn't know much about, had only heard mostly negative things about it. And it was a thing that came up that I was just sort of amused by. The fact that somebody suggested it kind of set off a flag in my head that was like, oh, this could be very interesting. Like, if there are people out there who really like this, maybe there's like a hidden gem quality to it. And I didn't say the genre, and that wasn't intentional, but pretend like it was. Because one of the things that I certainly didn't know about the game is that it is not a Metroidvania. I should have known this because I believe that that Symphony of the Night was like the first Metroidvania, like the reason that Castlevania gets lumped into that genre. And this is more of a like more straightforward 3D action game than I was expecting. Which is a positive for me. I don't know if that's true for everyone, but I don't really like Metroidvanias that much.
Yeah. Yeah. You pushed for the game, and I offered no resistance.
Yeah.
Because...
that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah. I'm always down for an N64 action-adventure game. But yeah. I think this was developed alongside Symphony of the Night, so yeah, I guess it makes sense. I actually, like, even if this had come after Symphony of the Night and there was more of an expectation that it might try to go for a similar type of level design, I don't know if they would have been able to pull it off with this early of like a 3D game. So I wasn't really expecting it to be one, personally. I didn't know what to expect at all, really. If I was a betting man, I probably would have guessed something like Ocarina of Time.
Which you wouldn't have been like horribly far off, but you would have been like a little bit far off.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I noticed right off the bat was that the game sucks ass for like an hour. And it made me realize as I played through the game that I think that a lot of the negative reception that this game has, which I looked into a little bit, it seems like it was more mixed at the time and has just washed out into everyone just has not played the game and has just heard it sucks, and they dismiss it completely off.
Right, yeah, it's like a Mario Sunshine, Donkey Kong 64 kind of situation.
Yeah. And I, to me, I feel like the people who have played the game and don't like it didn't get out of the forest. Like, because I almost didn't get out of the forest. Like, it took me way longer than it should have. But the forest part of this game where they're trying to, like, I guess teach you stuff is so much the most annoying part of this game by, like, 5 factors of 10. There's just an infinite number of enemies. You're not that familiar with the buttons yet. That's also not an exaggeration. Enemies just respawn infinitely. You cannot get a breather for even 1 second in this. And so it became like, it was almost comedic to me, as I would be like, I'm going to jump across this gap. And then I jump back across the gap, and there's like 70 more skeletons all of a sudden.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Like the first level feels really long too, and I'd be curious to go back and replay it. Now, like, having a firmer grasp on the game, because I just wonder how much of that is just like getting like just. I feel like the game has a steep learning curve. It's kind of janky. It's kind of hard to figure out how everything works, and. Yeah, and it is kind of like an endurance test, I think. At least I didn't find very much roast chicken in the first level, whereas later it kind of felt like I was never hurting for healing items. So I think
that's
it's
actually
a hard onboarding process, I guess.
Yeah. Also, that's a great thing to call out that I didn't think of, that, like, I had the same experience, but I didn't really clock it as such, because you do have, like I hit the limit on the amount of healing items I could have at a point in the game. Like, at some point I had more than 10. And I just, at the time, I was just like, man, I hope I don't run out of healing items before the first real level of the game. But yeah, they just don't give you that much. I think they thought that the level would be less long in development, but like, to a new player, you have no idea where you're going.
Right.
And all the areas kind of look the same. So it's hard to like, they're 2 separate areas that have like a series of tombs in them. And if you put me in either one of them, I would not be able to tell you which area I was in.
Right. And I think it has one, like, what I would say is the hardest enemy to deal with in the game, which is just the exploding skeletons.
Yeah. I was like 70% exploding skeletons, 30% Kung Fu Wolfman.
Oh, yeah.
Which I don't remember if he shows up at any other point in the game, but it was just like a werewolf that does jump kicks and shit. It is weird. Yeah, because the exploding skeletons, it's like if you miss once, which you're likely to do
because there's so many other enemies.
Yeah, which you could snap to, or like the lock-on system will show that you'll hit something, but if you're facing the wrong direction, it doesn't autocorrect to that, and that took me a minute to like get used to, because I'm used to like the Zelda-style Z targeting.
Right.
I was like, I would just get hit by exploding skeletons and be like, time to reload a save.
Right.
We talked about this briefly. Annie and I streamed a couple of days ago, and there should be a VOD up on the YouTube channel sometime in the next week or so, I would guess. And we talked about how important the first level of a game is.
Right.
And how that is so much more of a concern in the modern day. I think because of the number of games people have access to. Castlevania didn't give a shit at all. It was like, our first level's gonna suck, and then once you get by it, then the game becomes much better.
Yeah, I think they actually, the opposite. I think they cared way too much and then just completely missed the mark. Like, I think like
that's possible.
Like, they thought of this first level as this like big awesome spectacle that would hook players in. Like, 'cause it ends with like the motorcycle skeletons and the giant skeleton torso boss fight at the base of the castle. Like, I feel like the people who made this thought the first level was awesome.
Well, that's the thing. If that is the case, they were correct about motorcycle skeletons and the giant skeleton boss. Those are great. However, well, those are great until you're carrying a device that blows up if you get hit by anything. Then the motorcycle skeleton becomes a problem. But the in the first level, it starts and ends fine.
Yeah.
And I genuinely don't know if the whole middle part was even really necessary to an extent. Because you learn all the same stuff pretty quickly in the next level as well.
Yeah.
Like, how do I flip a switch where grates open sometimes? Like, those aren't complicated lessons to learn.
Right, yeah. Now, at the very least, I think they probably should have cut it in half.
Yeah. So yeah, it was funny because I played this game in 3 sittings, and the first sitting was the first level, and then in the second sitting, I had to play through the first level more. Like, I had not finished it. And then by the end of that session, I was like 75% of the way into the game.
Right.
So it was like it was a real discouragement to be in that forest for a while. But the game does open up after that, which is nice. And by open up, I mean close down, which is when it's way better. So as a counterpoint to how I opened this, I actually am shocked, given my proclivities, how much I enjoyed playing the main portion of this game. I've always been a fan of Castlevania's, like, I don't know if combat is the word. I haven't played that many Castlevania games, but I like using a whip. A whip is a fun weapon because you have to consider, like, angles and distances. So there's a lot more to it than, like, shooting a gun or swinging a sword.
Yeah, it's also got that, like, wind up time to the attack. So you have to be more deliberate.
That's true. And it's satisfying to land because it makes a whip crack sound. And then the skeleton bones explode out into the air. It's just real good.
Yeah. I found that's like the more deliberate, the game requiring you to be more deliberate in its combat is like what separates a good action game from like a button masher, in my opinion. And yeah, Castlevania definitely fits under that. Like, you feel like everything you're doing is very intentional, and you don't feel like there's that, like, attack assist where you just hit a button and hit an enemy without having to think about it.
Yeah. It has, like, more of a... Well, I mean, you said deliberate. That's just the right word for it. But it makes you think more about it, which allows the combat to take up a bigger portion of the game's, like, player attention pie chart, where it can get away with making other things more sparse or simpler because the combat is more of a active thing that you're participating in. And I think that serves the game well, especially with an early 3D game, right? Like, you're dealing with a lot of things that developers don't have a lot of experience with. So really honing in on a single element. Mario 64 is all about the movement and the visuals, whereas Castlevania can be all about the combat and, to some extent, weird platforming. Maybe they should have spent less time on that one, but we'll talk about it. So I think it serves the game really well. It should be noted that both of us played as Reinhardt, and Cassie does not have a whip. Is that her name? I think it is.
I don't remember. Or Carrie, maybe? Something like that.
Maybe Carrie? Possibly. She shoots, like, magic projectiles, which I feel like would be a different experience. But we did not play that character, and that's the end of that.
Yeah. I had to look something up, so I consulted a walkthrough, and it basically claimed that playing as her is like easy mode, basically. Like, just having a projectile weapon makes the game easier.
That tracks to
Supposedly.
an extent. Also following in the great tradition of, that's a sarcastic great, by the way, in the okay tradition of previous games, like Resident Evil, where they had a girl character and she was the easy mode,
Right.
for whatever reason. I think that's true in Resident Evil. I actually don't remember. One of them starts with more inventory space, so maybe Chris is
I
the
think
easy
Chris
one.
does, because he's got like the bigger vest, I think, with more pockets.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, so I take it all back.
Yeah, I think they have
Capcom did a
different-
better job than Konami.
Yeah, I
here.
think they have different strengths and weaknesses. Like, Jill might have more health or something. I don't remember.
That could be. Yeah, so there are two characters to play. We just don't have the experience of one of them. Had we talked about it beforehand, I would have tried to strong arm Andy into playing the magic character so that I could whip things,
Right.
but we didn't, and we just both chose the same character.
It seemed like the thing that like they expect you to do. You know, like he's the one on the box art. You know, he's the one who is descended from the Belmonts. He's the one whipping things. Like, I feel like he's like definitely supposed to be the primary main character.
He does feel more like the Castlevania character.
Yeah.
At least to a lay person. Because, like, I have played Castlevania and Castlevania 4, like Super Castlevania, and Symphony of the Night. And that's all. And to me, Reinhardt felt more like a Castlevania character. But I know that there are, like, it's a much larger universe these days.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all the DS Castlevanias that people like all star vampire boys like Alucard.
You gotta love a vampire boy.
Yeah. There is a character in the anime that is like a magic character. I wonder if she was inspired by the character from this game at all.
Oh, that's possible. The lasting legacy of Castlevania 64.
Cast a long shadow.
It castles a long shadow. Yeah, so kind of got lost there for a little while. We were just talking about the combat and stuff. And so I guess the other thing that ties into combat fairly well is something that Castlevania is known for, which is like enemy designs. I have to say, maybe one of the things I'm most sad about in this game, I feel like the boss designs were pretty interesting, but there was something always very vibrant about the pixel art characters in other Castlevania games, and this one feels very much like a standard 3D skeleton. It's a vampire, but he's like wearing the rumpled hat from Bloodborne. Like, he's like a Cockney vampire. Like, those were like the options for enemies. And we get like Medusa heads and bone dragons and stuff, but like none of them they don't pop as much. I'm sure that in 1999, I would not be saying this shit. I'd be like, it looks amazing. That looks like the skeleton I have in my own body. But in 2025, I'm less excited to see them. Whereas, like, when I look back on Super Castlevania, I'm like, that looked great and was cool as hell.
Yeah. I mean, it's just those growing pains of the early 3D games where modeling things took way more effort. And was
for sure.
you only had like 10 polygons to work with or whatever. Or the game couldn't run. But I agree. Yeah, it feels like most of the enemies are just kind of like basic fodder enemies. There isn't nearly as much variety either. You get your skeletons and bats and like lizard guys, and things like that. Some lesser vampires and a couple of like werewolf type guys and stuff like that. But yeah, that's about it. There's not nearly as many cool monster manual-esque designs going on.
Yeah. The shout-outs for me are like Scorpion Lady or
Right.
Spider Lady.
Yeah.
I was thinking Dark Souls 2 there for some reason.
In the tunnels, yeah. That one was kind of weird because of how often the enemies spawn. To have an enemy that big.
Just like fall out of the sky.
Just keep dropping in, just over and over.
Yeah. That's another growing pain of the early 3D era, which is just like enemies that respawn indefinitely. Like way easier to deal with in a 2D plane, but in 3D it means that they can just show up off camera and attack you.
Yeah, I didn't know that came off to me. Is maybe I'm trying to read into an old game too much, but like is there kind of like Band-Aid fix for making the game harder? Because I feel like most enemies you could just stun lock with the whip. Like you just mash the attack button and take very little damage.
Right.
Unless like the auto lock on like fucks up on you or whatever. So like I was wondering if that was like their way of like we'll make it hard by just like spamming the enemies at them nonstop.
That does seem very possible. Because the game as a whole, like the thing that killed me more than anything else in this game was falling off of a ledge.
Mm-hmm.
Like falling off of a ledge, significantly more dangerous than Dracula to me. And and so it did sort of like, it did feel like I was cruising through a lot of it, up until I hit platforming segments and stuff. So I can see that. I can imagine them looking at it and saying, like, this game is going to take 2 seconds to get through, which was a death sentence in 1999.
Yeah,
and to an extent is still now.
Enemy design. We just made all the enemies run at you. That's not very hard to deal with.
Yeah, no, you just kind of... It's funny because, like, it's the same issue that we saw in Super Mario 64, where it's like the Goomba. It's like the Goomba is no longer a threat in 3 dimensions because there's like a million ways that you can get around them.
Right.
Medusa heads are nothing in this game because it's like, is there like sine wave frequency going to match up with where you are at any given time now that there are 3 axes to deal with? And the answer is like pretty much never.
Yeah, that's why they put in that gondola section. So that stuff flying at you could be even a little bit of a threat.
Yeah. The fucking gondola section. Brief aside about the gondola section, and also a brief aside about how we played this game. My overall opinion of this game is going to differ depending on whether or not you accommodate for save states. Because without save states, I feel like a full point lower on this than I would otherwise. I can imagine myself getting frustrated at certain points that we'll get to.
Yeah, even I don't think I would have finished this if it weren't for save states. So, and I'm much more patient with the N64 games.
Infinitely more, yeah. The gondola section, I didn't create a save state when I got on the gondola, which I guess was my first mistake. But I got all the way to the end of B. So like right to where you step off to then get on the elevator to the next area.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the elevator thing cross the boundary where the ground was, and I just walked straight off into the abyss. Like, not a second hesitation. I just assumed I was above the ground and wasn't, and then had to go all the way back to the beginning, and was like, man, I am glad that I have. That's when I had a meditation on the use of save states. Because I was like, I feel like I would have just sawed my own leg off if that happened and then I had to go back to like the beginning of the tunnels or whatever.
Yeah. I had a moment early on in like the first level where I had like platformed up from like one of those rivers they make you go down to, and then like turned around or did something and ended up falling off the cliff into the water and dying, and had to go like not all the way back to the beginning, but like pretty far back. And I was like, oh well, save after you do everything. This is one of those games.
Yeah.
So luckily I was already doing that at that point. But for me with the gondola, I got to like that middle section where you had to switch over to the blue one. And I read the sign and it was like switch over to the other gondola, whatever. And I waited for like a couple seconds, didn't see anything, and then noticed there was an area below. So I just like jumped off and went down there assuming I'd be able to jump back up. So I went down there, there's like some wall chicken or whatever, some stuff, some red jewels and all that down there, but nothing.
Some roast beef, some chicken,
yeah, some roast beef, some chicken, a pizza, holy water, and and then realized I couldn't jump back up. So then I reloaded the save state, got back there, and then was like waiting on the thing, and then the thing comes by and knocks me off. Which didn't happen to me the first time because I had jumped down there voluntarily. So like that was really annoying to me that like I jumped down there because I wanted to one time. And then when I went back to it the second time, I fell for the trap and then had to do it a third time to finally get on the blue gondola.
Yeah, you have to go all the way back to the thing. It's like, and also
punish you for exploring a little bit.
Yeah, I found very little incentive to explore in the game, but there's one thing that you were talking about at the beginning, like the rivers, like having to climb up the rivers. I found like that was a particularly bad situation. So in older games, there's a lot of information that is often contained within the game's instruction manual. Putting a tutorial in a game was not normalized yet at that point.
Mm-hmm. Or probably required like a lot more effort.
True. Yeah, you'd have to actually program a tutorial instead of just writing things in a manual. I, however, grew up as a human being. I never read an instruction manual in my life.
Really?
Well, not really. But
I always loved looking at the instruction booklets. Yeah, like games like Tunic and even Watch the VOD. When we were talking about Lunacid, we looked through the cool manual. So yeah, the cool art always like worked on me. It was the way of tricking kids into reading something.
That's true. Yeah.
But anyway,
comic books did the same thing. But yeah, so I assume that in the manual for this game, it tells you how to like grab stuff and climb onto ledges. But playing the game without the manual, I didn't know to expect that. So my first ever save state was after I climbed down one of those things and then jumped to the platform and just like hit it face on and fell straight down into the water.
Mm-hmm.
And then was sent back to a save. And I was like, oh, it's one of these games, similar to how you thought.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me like 3 tries to like learn what the mechanics are, because it's not purely intuitive. Like if you hold the button, you grab onto it. You have to keep holding the button. If you let go of it for even a second, you will fall down.
Yeah.
And then you press up to climb up onto it, or left to right to sidle, which seems like an unnecessary function. I never found a reason to do that in the game. So yeah, like a simple jump, essentially, like platforming basics, killed me 3 times. Or twice or whatever before I figured out what the actual controls were.
Yeah, like I feel like 3 attempts before you figure it out is fine when you have save states. But imagine playing the game normal, where every time you do that, you have to go back to the save crystal, which is probably like a good 15 minutes of your life down the drain.
Yep, just because you had to learn. Or just like, I don't know. Put a jump that you have to hit with ground underneath of it.
Yeah.
You can retry.
Yes, that's a great point. The Super Mario Brothers
the first
style of design, introduce it non-lethally first.
Exactly. Like the very first time that a jump that you have to jump and grab and pull yourself up happens, there's an instant death pit below you. But it's funny because like that doesn't even happen really ever again in the game. Like even in the clock tower level in Tick-Tock Clock from Castlevania 64, there you have like almost all of those like platforming segments, and it's the last level of the game, just for context. If you haven't played it, most of those jumps are not lethal if you miss them.
Right.
Like, yeah, you could get stuck in between the cogs and die that way, but most of those jumps, like you can land and come back. Even in the second level in the tower, there are jumps with ground underneath them, and you can just land and try again. So I don't know why they made the first level as bad as humanly possible, but they tried.
Yeah, I want to say like one of the towers, like the execution tower or whatever the other one was called, those had jumps with like lava underneath.
That's true. Those ones did. So it's not like it never came back.
Yeah. But yeah, first level more punishing than the last one.
Yeah. And it's like, it's funny because I find the platforming in the game, I don't know how to describe this. I find the platforming itself, the action of platforming, to be satisfying because you have like a real long jump and like the platform, you never have to like do the equivalent of like a one tile jump in a Mario game. You just like always have like a nice thing to land on for the most part. And like the jumping itself is good. It's very committal. It feels kind of like Ghouls and Ghostsy, where it's like you jump and then there's not really anything that you can do between that and when you land, and you just have to hope you did it right. But for the most part, I liked it, but it was always like something about it felt bad, and I can't quite put my finger on what that was.
Maybe the camera. Like
could have been the camera.
Yeah, like because I found it to be surprisingly serviceable, but I'm me. I'm endeared to I think 3D platforming in the way that I feel like a lot of other people our age are endeared to like first person shooters or something. Like even a bad platformer, I'll probably like it at least a little bit. So yeah, I thought it was surprisingly serviceable compared to like what I expected. The only thing that bothered me is like some of the jumps were like the platforming sections would be like the only part of the game where like when you hit I was using a PlayStation 5 controller, so it was R1 on that controller, but the button that moves the camera behind you, a lot of platforming sections like it just doesn't work. Like the camera is like fixed, and that bugged me.
Yeah, and there's like there's 4 different camera styles, I think, actually, because there's also a boss view. It's like boss, action, battle, I think, and cinematic or something. Yeah, normal view, that's what it is. It's a normal and action are 2 different ones that I could barely tell what the difference was. And I was surprised, despite being a little annoyed that like they put me in charge of deciding what the best camera was to use at any given time, by putting it on a C button toggle. I found that I had fewer problems with the camera than I would have thought. Just from the era and like the sort of more cramped style of game that this is. But yeah, definitely some of the platforming sections. Like I remember having to make like almost a fully blind jump because when I came to the ledge, the camera just like rotated in front of me. And I was like, well, good luck to me, I suppose. Like I couldn't get it to face the other way again. So I had to like do like a loop, like run in a circle, and the camera would like slowly move. So I had a view of where I was going. That was somewhere in the tunnels, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But
it might also have something to kind of like do with his like turning radius. Like sometimes like approaching a ledge and like you're at like a weird angle, it can feel like awkward to try to like adjust yourself and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Like the
he
fine
might not
control.
be a car.
No, yeah.
But he might be like a bicycle. Like there's a level of like awkward turning to him for sure. But yeah, thankfully the platforming, this is another thing where I'm just gonna mention save states again. If you're playing this game in 2025 and you're used to games from 2025, use save states, because that was always like, the platforming was something that I thought was satisfying, but then once, if you take a look back and be like, I died like 3 times on that jump, and then add to that the cumulative time of having to get back to the jump every time, and when you die you lose your power up as well, like the strength of your whip attack, and have to recollect those, I can imagine it being very frustrating. So take my mostly positive take on the platforming with a slight grain of salt.
So I guess I wanted to talk about some of the presentation things. I want to say that it's like, is it the second level, the like mansion level where like you meet the 3 NPCs?
I mean, depending. The second level is like the castle wall.
Oh, right.
And then
yeah,
it's
you're
like
right. So this would be the third level.
Garden or something. And then, yeah, there's like an interstitial.
Yeah.
I would consider the castle wall an interstitial, but there's a fucking boss in it.
Right. Yeah, that just really surprised me. Because like the beginning, I'm expecting like it's Castlevania. I'm expecting it to be more action focused and less story focused. And I mean, I'd say in general it was. But like, I just like that level was, I thought, like an interesting, unexpected change of pace. Or there's this level, it's like a little bit more like explore this mansion, meet these 3 characters. Like there's like a little bit of a puzzle element into like how to get the things you need from them. That surprised me. I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, I feel like in this era, they were like, everyone was trying to just get a handle on what you could do with 3D game design. And like that level felt like they put more thought into it. Like, what could we do different because this is a 3D game? And I think it stands out as like one of my favorite parts of it.
Yeah. And also, because you led into this by talking about sort of the presentation, like it just looks really nice. Like, this is the kind of thing that the Castlevania team specializes in. And like, I'm not going to go so far as to say that Castlevania 64 is a gothic masterpiece, but like, it does such a good job of selling, similar to how Resident Evil did, not to mention Resident Evil twice on this episode, but similar to that, like, it does a really good job of selling the sort of like dusty, musty, creepy, eerie mansion thing. Like, that is a trope in and of itself, and they do a good job with it. And like, the characters are very much in the spirit of classic Castlevania, where they're really over the top, not like bombastic, but like the concepts are so like stupid, I guess, that it works. Like, it's really endearing to me. Like, I love Vincent being like, I am the greatest vampire hunter and you're just some piece of shit and go to hell. And he just like ignores you. The moment that you leave, he goes to bed. Like, he falls asleep in the bed in the room.
Right.
And like Rosa being a vampire and watering roses with blood. And she's like, I have to water the white roses. And you're like, but those roses aren't white. Like, it's so good in a really silly, dumb way that I think is like on brand to a T. So I do agree with you on the mansion level. I think it's like probably my favorite as well.
Yeah. It's very like pulpy, literal, like literally like Pulp Fiction.
And yeah, I mean, the other thing that you mentioned, like, it has a bit of a puzzle to it. There's like, it's interesting coming from the more purely mechanical challenge of the previous levels and all future levels. I think there's like a grand total of 3 puzzles in this game. Into one where there is more exploration. It's a good change of pace, and it happens at a good time because you probably still haven't gotten over the stupid woods yet at that point.
Right.
And it does a lot to sort of bring you into it.
Yeah. And then that level leads into the maze level.
Yeah, fuck that.
Where you get chased through it the whole time. Which is, I feel like they nailed that mansion level and then just completely missed the mark on the maze one. Because it's also got a gimmick, like they're trying to do something different. Like you're getting chased through it, you have to follow this kid. And for me, I died to the big Frankenstein monster who chases you probably an embarrassing number of times, 4 or 5 times. I just thought he was a really hard boss fight. Before I realized I just had to run away from him and that I couldn't kill him, which was pretty annoying.
Yeah, I think it took me 2 attempts, and I was clued in by the fact that the dogs didn't die. When you kill the dogs, they'll like lay down for a while and then they stand back up. And I was like, oh, I'm just supposed to run away. But I definitely tried to kill him twice, like fucking hurling axes at him.
Yeah, I just thought it was like an older game, like very ill-conceived difficulty spike or something.
Yeah, that is a classic thing. Yeah, no, and not only that, but like the level itself is botched in a entirely other way, because it is like it's a hedge maze that has these like big set pieces in it that should act as like landmarks for you. Like there's the big tower area, and there's like the fenced off room, and there's like locked doors in it. But you are only supposed to run.
Right.
So your instinct to like stop and check the top of the tower or whatever is just going to get you killed and make you start over again.
Right.
So it is like, it's weird how, and it's like, it's the only level in the game that feels like it. So that is something, I suppose. But it's a good sign that other areas felt like they had more of a cohesive design than the maze does. And it is mercifully short. So it's not like you're in there for like an hour. It's like an 8-minute experience, depending on how many times you die.
Right.
That could end up being like half an hour to 45 minutes, but just knowing where to go, you just have to run through it and then walk back through the mansion and then run through it a second time.
Right. And then the other level I wanted to call out is the castle center, which is probably the longest and most involved level in the game, where you have to get the magic nitro in the mandrake root. Man, a lot of running around. But like I actually thought it was pretty cool. Once again, if I didn't have save states, I probably would fucking hate this level. But yeah, I kind of like what I was saying about the mansion part. Like, it feels like it is embracing that 3D action adventure-ness. Like, you're exploring more. There's puzzles. You have to like do an environmental puzzle that's like got like 3 different parts to it. It ends in like a cool set piece boss. So like, yeah, it's probably my like highlight of the game for me. It's not executed perfectly, but like I like what it's going for a lot.
Yeah, I can sort of agree with that. I think that I wish that the magic nitro part, not the part where you just walk it from the room to the door right outside,
right,
but like the more involved part, was more like straightforward in its setup. Because like I'm fine with Reed, I'm not fine with, but like I recognize that the time it was 1999. There was time for clacks, and apparently there was also time to walk across gears and shit. I'm fine with that part being like difficult and like its own unique challenge with the one hit death mechanic and you can't jump and stuff. Like there's a cool element to that. But I found that I didn't know where to go after I had put the set the first explosive. Like I eventually found a place to put the second Mandragora, and then I tried to go back and get more of the nitro, and I ended up just kind of wandering around for a long time. And I feel like if that part was shortened, and it was like nitro through the room with the lizard man and all the gears and shit, and then to the destination and then the boss, I would have liked it a lot better. But there was just this like prolonged period of me being lightly lost and confused that I could have done without.
Yeah, no, I mean, that happened to me as well. Like, there's definitely like the level would have benefited from like setting up what you're supposed to do at the beginning. Like that you need to deactivate the magic seal and then blow up the wall.
Yeah, it would have been extremely helpful just to like make it make sense.
I really like that the you have to talk to what seems like an enemy. Like I thought that was an interesting little interaction. There's like a lizard guy that is not hostile and like runs away from you, and you have to like realize that you can talk to him. And he tells you, he gives you the key to get the Mandragora roots. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. Like you could have had something like that, just like an NPC on like right at the beginning of the level that could just like set up what's going on.
Yeah. I also wish that guy had some payoff.
Yeah.
I wish that at the end you freed him from his curse or something. That would be cool. I don't know where they would have inserted it. Like you would have, and like Rosa shows up and then he's like, I'm here too.
Right.
I was the lizard man.
Yeah. No,
I know I don't look anything like him anymore.
I agree. Like he stands out and you do want like more, like something else from that. But yeah.
Yeah, it would be a hard sell as to what, like, actually getting him in the
maybe he gives you the key to the Mandragora room. Maybe if you bring him one of those, it's like an antidote to the curse, and it turns him back to human or something. And then he gives you fucking roast beef or whatever.
He should have given you roast beef. I agree.
Or a bunch of gold or something.
No, the one other, and this maybe you don't agree with me on this, but to me the black mark on that level is the boss that has a combo that kills you instantaneously, where if you miss time your dodge on the horns, he can just like laser beam you and it nukes you from orbit.
No, I mean, I agree with that. I got lucky. Like on my third attempt, I was able to like just get just the right amount away from him and run in a circle, and it just looped him into his running animation. So I just kept running and whipping and just killed him without taking any damage.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't. On the attempt where I won, I used like 3 healing items because he would just hit me. And your dodge is so unreliable because it's like a weird slide.
Yeah, it is. It feels like completely useless almost.
Yeah.
It's got like startup and end lag. And you get hit 95% of the times you try to use it to dodge something.
Yeah, it does not feel good. The true dodge in Castlevania is to just jump a whole lot.
Oh yeah, or to duck.
I don't know why that works, but it just does. But yeah, the slide, and the slide isn't used really at all for anything. Like there's almost no, in the maze when Malice goes under the the hedge, I was like, oh, I can slide under the hedge, but you can't. Like, it looks like you should be able to, but you don't go through it. So I died to a Frankenstein after that.
Right.
So the dodge actually got me hurt more than it helped most of the time.
There's like in one of the towers, one of the Lord of the Rings, the 2 towers levels from the latter part of the game has like spinny, spiky things, and like you can slide under some of those.
You can slide under those. Though I have in the past slid under one and then got hit by the oncoming one. That was
well, that's your own fault.
That's my fault. I didn't look ahead. But yeah, you can also just crouch under those. But I see your point.
But I mean, it's the same mechanic. It's just you slide when you're moving and you just crouch when you're standing still.
Yeah, but so it has a use. I will take it back. There's its one good use, I think. But the bull does explode into bones, which I do
pretty
love.
Rad, yeah. I like it, because he's already dead. So yeah, as you like whip him, like all his flesh falls off. Pretty cool.
So that was great. I thought that was super good. Just as like a follow up on bosses generally. There were most of the bosses I liked from a visual level. The bull, I think, is my favorite. From a mechanical standpoint, most of them are like fine to okay. Like, I wasn't like blown away by most of them, except when the bull knocked me down and then literally blew me away with a giant laser beam.
Right.
But I do want to call out Death having like a fucking weird squid attack or like a fish attack. Where he just summons a flying eel from nothing to come attack you. I didn't see that coming at all. I don't know if I was supposed to.
Yeah.
It was just really funny. It was so strange. But I did love it. Like, that's the best part of the death fight, because otherwise it's just like a bullshit chip damage fight.
Oh yeah. See, I feel like I killed him so fast that I don't even remember what his moves were.
Well, I don't know if he had moves in as much as he was just surrounded by scythes at all times. So you would attack him and then you get hit, and then you attack him and then you get hit, and then he summons a fish from outer space and then you hit him and then you get hit by the scythe. Like, the fish is the only thing that stands out in that fight at all. And then there's a 3-phase final boss, which I think is notable.
Yeah. The Dracula fights feel like they're the only ones that really have like boss design, like, or like as we would like understand it from a modern perspective. Like the other ones, like some of them are okay, but they just kind of feel like they're just trying stuff. Whereas this, they actually feels like they really thought about it like 5 times more than everything else, which makes sense. But yeah, like each one, like blah blah blah, broken record. With save states, I think each phase felt very doable, but like if you were doing it all natural, it would suck. Because each fight had, at least to me, like felt like it had a gimmick or like a thing you had to learn to be able to beat it. Like the first phase gave me a lot of trouble till I realized you just like can just jump and whip his face. And if I stood at the front of the room or back of the room, whatever, by the coffin, I could kind of keep the whole room in check, and I wouldn't get sucked into his move where he sucks you in and then feeds on you. So I could see that one coming and just hit him in the face. Because if you run around, like, you would just be running and then just all of a sudden you're getting sucked back, and it's like hard to deal with. So yeah, once you realize that fight's pretty easy. Then the second fight, it was just you just had to duck under the fireballs, and then the fight's easy. And then the third one is just kind of like you have to spam the attack button and do enough damage before he can kill you, sort of a thing. So
I like flipped those two, where I didn't know what was like. I couldn't describe the second phase Dracula fight in a way that I think accurately depicts what it is he does, because I know that he teleports in big beams of light and shoots blue fireballs, but I would just either be so close to him that he never got to fire the blue fireballs because I would just hit him in the face, or I would be far away and he would shoot the fireballs, and then I would just use all of my special ammunition to kill him, because I didn't know there was going to be a third phase where he was a dragon.
Right.
So the third phase I had to play more carefully in comparison to the second one, because I used all my resources on the second one.
Right.
And then on the third phase, I just had to use healing items more.
That makes sense. Yeah, but it made it easier on the second phase to like stand on one of the little four like outcrops, so you can see the whole...
I was too scared of falling off, man.
That's fair. But yeah, you could like see where he spawned, so that you could like run towards him and hit him. And that's another use for the slide. So if he spawns far away from you, you can run and like slide under the fireball and hit him in a cool action move.
Yeah, that sounds like a cool action move
the
to me.
drive-by slide. The slide by. There we go.
The
ghost ride
on that one. Sorry. Yeah. We're getting there. We'll figure this out. We'll know what the move is called. But yeah, that was it. The third phase of the Dracula fight felt extremely weird to me, because like you get teleported to a desert. Yeah, and then he's like a big bulbous dragon thing.
It felt very centipede demon to me.
Why?
Because he has like his tail is basically a centipede. Like it curls around him and it's got a bunch of legs. That's the part of the design that sticks out in my memory.
That makes sense. Yeah. It was, I mean, it is one of the cooler visual designs on enemies in the game. In fact, I might argue it is the coolest, because now I'm thinking about it and I don't know if anything really...
the most elaborate for sure.
Yeah, it's truly vile, and I do like it for that. But yeah, just the fact that he has an attack that just like deals half your health in a huge area made it, I don't know. That's why it felt very patient to me.
Yeah,
where it was just like, I hit him, and then I go back, and then I dodge, and then I run back in, I hit him again, and then I run right back out, because if you hit him too many times, he might do the supernova move and just kill me instantly.
Yeah. For me, I learned the tell, because like he summons these two like fire dragon things, like after you take off like a third of his health bar or whatever.
Classic Dracula shit.
And those are super fucking annoying, because they'll just keep running into you. So like I learned the tell for when he did the move where he just like shoots the beam, or I mean it's like a ball of lightning or whatever, and like it just like flies forward and then explodes in the distance. Like I don't really understand the point of that move, but it takes him a long time to do it. So I learned the tell for that, and then I would run in and like whip him like 8 times in a row while he's doing that and run away. And so like the time that I beat him, like I just kind of melted his health bar by doing that.
Oh, that sounds good. I don't think I ever... I'm notoriously bad at like learning tells like on my...
Yeah, he's only got like
unless it's
3 or 4
something I play
moves,
a lot.
though.
That's true. It's very light on that one. So yeah, I did not end up learning much, I guess. I learned a little bit, I suppose. That's all I have to say about bosses. Did you find yourself using the special weapons very much? And if so, or if not, which one did you end up liking the most?
I didn't use them a ton until like the second half of the game. I really liked the holy water, because it just felt good. Like if there was like a enemy, like a bigger werewolf guy or something, like just throw it down in front of you and they just walk into the fire and take like a bunch of damage from that. That just felt like a good oh shit button, like you just throw this down and kind of like
Right.
stop the enemy from getting closer to me. So that one felt like it had the most practical utility. And then I also liked the cross boomerang.
Same on all fronts, except I think I would flip them. I think I like the cross more than the holy water, but those were the two. I think I used the axe more often than I did the holy water, and it was just because I felt like I never found holy water, but I always had axes. But the cross was the one that once I got to the last like third of the game, I just stopped picking up weapons. I just kept the cross at all times because that was the one that I found like I had the most success with. Yeah, and that was I really mostly I used it a lot in the tower of the duel tower,
Right.
the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links tower.
It's time to duel tower.
The time to duel tower, because that one felt like it was. I was just like, let's get through the combat so that I can try this jump puzzle again. And by puzzle, I mean just jumping regular.
Right.
But sometimes it was hard to do. So it was, yeah. I found, like, the special weapons are they've always been weird in Castlevania, because at least in this game, you can choose when you want a specific one. Like, you don't just accidentally pick them up and shit. But it was always... It's like... I would see that I had, like, 99 energy crystals and was like, I should really use the special weapon. And then I still wouldn't do it for a long time. Just tying something to a resource really ruins it for me because I have a problem. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like most people are like that. I did that too early on, but like once I started using them, I realized, that it doesn't really matter because enemies drop them like constantly.
Can't get any back in the Dragon Dracula fight though.
That's true.
I can tell you that much. I did think I had an item in my inventory the whole game that was just called Special 01, and I thought that it was like a consumable crystal that would let you use your special weapon, right? Because it's called special, seemed like it makes sense. Apparently, it unlocked hard mode when I beat the game. I had no idea. I saved it. I was like, oh, well, this is a consumable that I will use later. And then I tried to use it and it was like, cannot be used. I was like, great. I don't know what this is then. Turns out it was the hard mode crystal. Who'd have thunk it?
Not me.
Yeah, certainly not me.
The only thing I have that we didn't talk about is that the game has a day-night cycle and a mechanic where you have these cards where you can swap it from day to night. Right. Which I think is interesting. Like, day-night cycles were, like, popular, I feel like, around this time. And I like that the cards, like, interact with it, but it feels just like not a fully developed idea. Like, you need them to progress through the tunnels, I think, to get to the exit. Or the waterway or whatever, if those are two different levels, I don't remember. But yeah, that's the only time you like need to interact with it. So it does kind of feel like an idea that kind of got dropped.
Yeah. Also, I think to get Rosa to show up, I think it has to be nighttime.
Oh yeah, it has to be like 3 a.m. It has to be the witching hour, I think.
It's got to be the witching hour. But yeah, it is. And you could even argue, I would fight back against this argument, that you don't need to interact with it to get through the tunnels because you can just sit on ass and wait. Right. But like, that's not an option as far as I'm concerned.
And it affects like enemy strength. Like enemies do more damage at night and less in the day. But I didn't find it noticeable at all. Yeah,
I wouldn't have even claimed that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that was
it
a
is
thing.
true, but yeah, I didn't. I wouldn't have been able to tell you that if I didn't read it.
Right. Yeah, I found it to also be kind of a nothing burger mechanic, but I don't know. I agree. There's like a cool element to it. If more had been done with it, especially given the fact that you have the Sun and Moon cards, so it would be cool if they were less stingy with the cards and also added more things that interacted with it. Like, I never felt like it was a strategic decision for me to make the time different. I
Right.
just played the game as if it didn't have a day-night cycle until I ran into one of those doors. So,
But they could put it on the back of the box.
they
Yeah,
could
it
put
has
it on the
day-night
back of the
cycle.
box. Yeah, I never really cared much about the day. I found like the day-night cycle in like in the N64 Zelda games is so much more of an annoyance than it is a feature. I feel like the only game that I was ever excited about a day-night cycle in was Pokemon,
Yeah.
because it attuned itself to like the real world clock, and that was cool. I thought that was pretty rad.
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
Animal Crossing took that concept and ran with it. So
Yeah, I just think like battery saves or whatever, like it just became like possible. So it just became like a popular thing for developers to integrate at the
yeah,
time.
just a flash in the pan.
Yep.
Well, I guess we now just have day-night cycles as kind of like a standard in open world
Yeah,
games.
yeah,
so
yeah.
what are you gonna do? Do we have inexplicable fire dragon attack thoughts?
My inexplicable dragon fire attack thoughts are yeah, I found that I liked this game a surprising amount. Like much more than I expected to. Like I didn't hear like a lot of like specific like hate for this game, but like I always had this impression that it was like people were very dismissive of it. Like I feel like people just don't acknowledge this game exists at all, kind of. So yeah, I expected it to be like god awful, like one of those early 3D N64 games that's like unplayable almost. But it really was not that. In my opinion, like it feels like about as good as most other N64 games from the time, I would say. There are some things that are a little janky about like the movement, and then I didn't personally like the auto lock on. It felt a bit too finicky. But yeah, I think its biggest weakness, which I think we honed in right at the beginning of the episode, is that it's a very steep learning curve at the beginning, and especially if you were playing it on the original hardware and you had to repeat a bunch of content every time you died. I do think it would be much less enjoyable. So yeah, like this is a case where I feel like playing it now, like with save states, like through emulation, makes it more enjoyable. I mean, unless you're into that old school challenge, unless you're a masochist.
That's the theme of Fanbruary this year.
Yeah. So yeah, I like the first half of the game where it's like a little bit more exploration based. It feels more like there's more of that joy of early 3D games where it feels like the developers were excited to be able to make a 3D game, and there's like some creative different stuff being tried. The second half of the game is much more straightforward, much more of like a classic Castlevania gauntlet, and then as a result, it feels like way less than half of the game. But it is, I think, about half of the areas are after that. So it is like a weird pacing, and I kind of wonder if it was intentional. That like once you get closer to your goal, things get more like streamlined and straightforward. But unintentional or not, I kind of liked that pacing, even though I kind of preferred the more open exploration-y bits of the first half. But yeah. So I feel like this is exactly the kind of thing that I like to find in a Fanbruary game. Is like an interesting older game that I've like overlooked. Like I just get those very intense nostalgic pangs going back to an N64 game, so I'm always down for that. So yeah, I enjoyed my time with it. It was a bit frustrating at the beginning, but once I was into it, surprising amount of fun to be had.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I it's funny because like I did enjoy this game. Like, I actually do think I like it, but it's hard to point out like a specific thing. In like, there are highlights in the form of like those, like the mansion level where you get to explore and talk to people and kind of fall in love with the sort of charm of the like B movie tone that a lot of Castlevania games hit really well. And but it's not like I was like, oh, well, the combat was so good or the platforming was so good. It's like a combination of it being much better than I expected it to be, and also calling back to the time in my life when I was really getting into video games. Like, that combination of nostalgia and like a surprising amount of competence really does wonders for the game. And I think that, like, when you look at other Castlevania games in context, like, yes, there are some that are better and like well designed and deserving of the place in history that they hold. I do feel like Castlevania 64 is commonly overlooked based on just it being okay in comparison and not bad specifically. And I don't think that it is either of those things. I think it's actually pretty good. I think it has cool visual design, and the combat is satisfying. The platforming is satisfying, though at sometimes frustrating, and the saves are maybe a little more brutal than they need to be. So yeah, I just come out positively on this in like the most neutral way imaginable. Like, not a lot of caveats. This is just like a fun game and one that I don't mind going back to. It doesn't show its age in the bad ways, but it does show its age in the good. It's like the George Clooney of games.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Fair enough. Yeah, because it didn't like get better with time. It's just like not as bad as you would think with time. That's, yep, put it on the back of the box. Thank you for listening to No Clip this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're staying actually in a similar time period, because we're going to be talking about Shenmue. And I should learn whether that's pronounced Shenmue or Shenmue by the time that we record.
I'm pretty sure it's just Shenmue.
Moo, like a cow. Gotcha.
Yeah.
But yeah, Shenmue is a I don't know. I almost want to say infamous game for being a game that doesn't. It's like it's known for being a game that does not use the common video game verbs. Mm-hmm. There's not like a ton of conflict in the way that you associate with games. So there is some. So I'm looking forward to it because it's one that I feel like is a big knowledge gap for me.
Yeah. I don't know how I would describe it because I haven't played it either, but I feel like I'm more aware of it than you, I think. But I would guess I would describe it as like slice of life, kind of narrative focused, but also like more weird, I guess.
Yeah, that aligns with what I've heard in the past. So I'm looking forward to it personally. So we'll get to that next time. And until that time, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com or on splattershot.pro, which, as I've been told in the last week, is apparently a great domain.
Of course.
And I knew it, but it's good to hear confirmation. There you can find links to our email address, our Twitter account, the YouTube channel, our Discord server where you can talk about the games or suggest games for us to play. You could listen to our old episodes, including ones that we did on Symphony of the Night, on
Hollow Knight, Metroid Dread,
those are what about
Ocarina of Time.
Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Harvester? That's probably not good. The like button is only susceptible to damage if you hit it in the head. So jump up and whip that like button.
Yeah, jump up, but hold X to grab onto the ledge so you can pull yourself up onto it after awkwardly sidling for a minute because you can't figure out which way is up because of the camera angle. And ring that bell. Also, get mad at us in the comment section for liking Castlevania 64 and disliking Darkest Dungeon.
I like this. Full stop.